All right, well, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our session Classroom in the Cloud, supporting best practices for virtual instruction. Here is our agenda for this session. After some brief introductions, we will identify our session objectives, discuss ways to support your staff in their transition to virtual teaching, identify best practices to look for in virtual instruction, and then wrap up hopefully with some time for questions. So before we dive headfirst into the weeds with our topic, Leanna and I will introduce ourselves. My name is Colleen Gard. I am an instructional leadership consulting specialist with Pearson Online and Blended Learning. I've been an educator of one sort or another for over 10 years. I've taught in traditional early childhood, middle school, and high school classrooms before moving on to a full-time virtual school, Indiana Connections Academy, 6 years ago. At Connections, I taught high school English. I also coordinated in-person social events and field trips. I trained new teachers, and then I served as a high school administrator before taking on my current role in instructional leadership coaching. I grew up in the Philadelphia area, so you might spot an accent here and there, but it's mostly gone. I've lived in central Indiana with my husband and 3 young children for years and years now. And now I will turn it over to my teammate and co-presenter, Leanna.
Hi everyone, my name is Leanna Wilson and I'm also an instructional leadership consulting specialist with Pearson. I've been an educator for 25 years, teaching K through 12 and college students in both traditional and online classrooms. And in 2012, I started my career at Pearson as a curriculum writer, and then went on to be an full-time online teacher, master teacher, manager of teacher operations, and finally landed at my current role as an ILC specialist. So as ILC specialist, Colleen and I work in partnership with various Connections Academy schools, providing consulting and coaching to administrators and teacher managers to advance their practices as instructional leaders and provide customized support to improve instructional efficacy and accelerate student performance. Ironically, I'm also from the East Coast, being born and raised in New Jersey. So if you spot an accent here and there, it might come through, although I think I currently also live in Indiana, and I think my accent definitely has mellowed out over the years. I live here with my husband and my 2 older children. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Colleen to take us through our key question and session objectives.
Great, thanks, Leanna. We know back to school season has a whole new look across the country this year. We understand that this is uncharted territory for many, and that as school administrators, you're doing everything that you can to get your staff and families off to a great start this fall. With that, certainly comes a level of stress as you navigate these new waters of virtual teaching and learning. Today, we hope to answer an important question that many of you likely have. How do school administrators support teachers in implementing best practices in virtual instruction? How do you continue doing your role as instructional leader when you're not in your building with your staff and with your kids? We're going to talk about ways that you can be that successful school leader while your schools operate outside of your buildings. So our objectives for today: develop strategies for building community and creating professional workspaces for staff. Learn how to support teachers as they adjust their delivery of instruction to the online teaching and learning environment. And recognize effective implementation of best practices in virtual instruction. Now, as we move through this session, notice that there will be callouts in the corner of some slides that will look like this. These callouts will direct you to the resources that we provided. I believe that you could access those resources from the conference app, along with this slide deck. And the resources really will help to expand on the ideas that we are sharing out and provide more concrete examples that you might share with your staff.
So let's get started. As we were preparing for this session, we asked ourselves, if we were coming from a brick and mortar school district, what are the two big questions that we would want to know more about in regards to transitioning an entire school staff to a virtual school environment? Those two questions were, how do I lead an entire school staff remotely? And how do teachers teach from home? So today we are going to start with the first leadership question, how do I lead from home? So building community virtually with a large staff that you're used to seeing every day in person can be daunting at first. I'm sure I don't have to tell you that, you know. While there are many ways in which you interact and disseminate information to your staff that are not going to change, there certainly are new methods of communication that are vital to cultivating staff climate and culture in the remote working environment. Effective remote communication will help your team feel connected to each other and ensure your staff has the tools they need to remain productive each week. Building school culture is possible in the remote working environment. I promise you it is. Consider being strategic and proactive in planning out how you will incorporate this throughout the school year. So I'm going to go through a couple ideas for you on this slide. Coffee chats. One idea is to schedule a once-a-month coffee chat with an open house feel. Block out a window of time on a Friday, inviting staff to pop in and say hello as they're able to talk about their month, upcoming plans, what they're doing that weekend, or what has transpired that week. Weekly video messages. Weekly video messages are an effective way to not only get out key information to staff, but it also helps to build rapport through a face-to-face delivery of communication as you're working from home. These do not take long to create and should be short and sweet. What do you want your staff to know that is most important for the week? What are some inspiring, motivational words you can deliver to set the stage for a week of teaching and learning with their students? Team building events. There are many ways to incorporate remote team building activities throughout the school year. Some examples are a team PowerPoint presentation or Google slide deck, surprising another team or even individuals, where everyone creates a different slide on there and sends kudos or thankfulness messages their way. Contests, team challenges, fitness challenges, book studies, volunteer opportunities, even creating a space that's blogs for sharing with each other. And virtual lunches. Where's the faculty lounge? You have to create it, so you can create this space for your teachers. Like the coffee chats, you can set up a virtual space for your teachers to collaborate, commiserate, and stay connected. Creating remote opportunities for team collaboration can build team camaraderie, school spirit, and rapport among colleagues. So virtual communication, it's important to outline communication expectations with your staff right from the beginning, so there is no guessing as to how to communicate with you, individual and large group teams, and availability for those expectations. When working remotely, it is very easy to feel like you can't disconnect. Your staff needs to know your availability. While you can't see your staff every day, the temptation to micromanage can creep up in the not knowing what everybody's doing. And that leads us to daily deliverables. One of my favorite quotes I used to tell my staff when I manage large teams was, if everything is a priority, nothing is a priority. What are the top priorities for the week that must get done? Are those expectations of deadlines communicated? Let staff know the expectations for the week and provide flexibility as you can to get those things done by your staff. Tone in etiquette. So transitioning to remote communication can be tricky. One of those reasons being that most communication will take place asynchronously through written word. Be aware in your writing of all communication, reread and reread before sending. Your typed words can be interpreted in many different ways by the receiver, and everyone places their own tone and emphasis to words as they read. Make sure your team feels respected, writing is professional, and your tone of voice in writing is clear, communicating expectations, but yet does so with a certain amount of warmth and inspiration. And then finally, team meeting tools, platforms for communication. Know your platform, like the one we're in today, we're in Zoom. Know your platform for communication and spend some time learning the ins and outs of the platform before that first back to school session with your staff. As I'm sure all of you have experienced this year, large staff meetings in a virtual space can lend themselves to technology issues, whether it is volume too loud, people not muting microphones, webcam mishaps, communication lagging, etc. One trick to troubleshooting this as best as you can is through setting norms for group virtual meetings. Setting an expectation of using webcams, like when they should or should not be on, professional attire, muting microphone expectations, and even communication protocols for large or small group meeting sharing. I wanted to share an example of that last one. So one trick that I learned from a former supervisor of mine in staff meetings was that he set the norm that if anyone had anything they wanted to say during a large group meeting, they should type an asterisk into the chat area while he was talking. He then would pause and he would go in order of the typed asterisks so that everyone's time and space was respected. It curbed the techie issues of people talking over each other, video lagging, and it allowed everyone to feel heard and valued. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Colleen.
Perfect. Thanks, Leanna. So alongside creating a safe and positive remote work environment for your staff, your work as instructional leaders is also to support teaching and learning. The 2021 school year is going to pose a new set of challenges in handling learning gaps among students and the virtual teaching learning curve among your staff. It's so important to keep a pulse on the teaching and learning practices that are happening at your schools. So how do you do that when your classrooms are empty? Your actions as instructional leaders can still be very much like your work in your school buildings. I would bet that everyone here has done more classroom and hallway walkthroughs than you can count. While it may seem like another obstacle, observing teaching and learning can actually become a little bit easier in the virtual environment. Moving school online frees your time from the constraints of bell schedules and long hallways and crowded stairwells. As you think about your workday, take time to walk the virtual hallways. So what I mean by that is explore the various ways that teachers are delivering instructions to students and the ways that students are engaging with teachers and with each other. In addition to impromptu walkthroughs, you likely conduct formal or informal observations on a regular basis. So with virtual teaching and learning, you can still pop into teachers' synchronous class sessions to see how they're utilizing that time with students. And we also recommend watching snippets of recorded lessons. So teachers might be posting recorded tutorials or mini lessons online for students. Take a look at those materials that they're posting to see how they're optimizing those resources for kids. As a school administrator, you're also used to digging into data. So if possible, take a look at samples of the work that students are submitting to really get that student level, item level analysis still in your hands. Collect and analyze that student learning data. And finally, based on what data shows you, you're probably used to touching base with teachers and acting on that data to drive continued improvement. Student learning artifacts and data are really a window into what virtual teaching and learning look like for your school and can help you to get a sense of where teachers and students are thriving and where they might need more support. What you learn in these observations should provide you with talking points with your teachers and individual team and maybe even department meetings, as well as uncover potential opportunities for professional development. Okay, so before you head into these virtual walkthroughs and observations, and before you start analyzing teaching and learning, you might be wondering what you should be looking for and what you should be coaching teachers towards. So let's explore that second big question that Leanna had mentioned. How do teachers teach from home? Leanna and I are going to share with you some tried and true best practices of virtual instruction so that you can support your teachers in better understanding how to effectively teach from home. Always, and especially now, it's paramount that educators truly believe that all students can learn. As the building leaders, you set the tone for your staff and your families, so your mindset is so important. The school community needs to feel motivated and believe that virtual learning can work. And there are strategies that the school and individual teachers can put into place in order to build connection and motivation across the school. Just like teachers need to feel connected to one another, students and families should still feel like they're part of the school community and the classroom community. Teachers can use a variety of engagement strategies to build and maintain a close-knit learning community among their students. Leanna is going to talk a little bit about what some of those strategies might look like in just a little bit. Students will need to be more motivated to learn and engage when they can see clear connections to themselves, to the real world, or to something that they've learned already. These things really help to pull students into their learning. As teachers get to know their students better, they can personalize learning based on what will grab and keep their students' attention. And sometimes this is done even more easily in the virtual learning environment. Teachers are no longer in front of 30 kids at a time. They might be with small groups, or they might be one-on-one with students, and they can truly tailor learning to the student or to those small groups that they're meeting with. Teachers should be collecting evidence of what student learning looks like, and they should do this regularly and in a variety of ways. So from individual conversations with students to their submitted assignments, teachers really have the opportunity to gauge each student's learning and to follow up with students to ensure mastery. Again, virtual learning really allows for teachers to personalize this experience for students so that they can have the time to master a skill or concept, rather than having the whole class try to learn and then move on all at the same pace. And finally, celebrating successes, big and small, can keep everyone motivated to keep working hard. All right, choosing delivery. Just as you would expect teachers to vary their instructional strategies in the classroom, you want to look for this variation in learning activities for students in the virtual learning environment. Teachers should be purposeful in their method of delivery and consider several factors, like where they are in the instructional cycle, where the student's level of understanding is, and what outcomes they're working towards. So we'll talk a little bit about those different methods of delivering instruction. First, asynchronous learning activities occur when students are working independently. These activities are suitable for when it's okay for students to be working at different times and at different paces. So consider times when the teacher would maybe deliver direct instruction, or where the teacher is addressing lower depths of knowledge, whether they're just developing those skills or assessing them. In a traditional flipped classroom, teachers use that out of class or asynchronous time for students to learn and independently practice information, so that their in class or synchronous time can be spent engaging with the new learning in deeper ways. That obviously takes me to synchronous learning activities, which include teaching and learning in real time. Teachers can use synchronous class sessions to maintain student engagement and community, especially through discussion and collaborative activities. This is a great way to deliver targeted or differentiated instruction and to provide students the opportunity to apply and demonstrate their learning at higher depths of knowledge. More guidance and examples of these methods of delivery are available on the resource sheet that was provided. But regardless of the instructional strategy that's chosen for a learning activity, teachers should always require students to produce something based on their learning in order to promote engagement, active learning, and as a means of formative assessment. It really helps them to keep a pulse on where each student is when they have some kind of a product coming out of each learning activity.
Okay, so now that we've introduced asynchronous and synchronous learning and when to choose one method of delivery over the other, We wanted to share some ways that teachers can leverage those learning activities to help build community and engage their learners. So let's look at the left side, some of those ideas for asynchronous learning. Student showcase. As the teacher is grading, he or she can find opportunities to showcase student work the following week. This can be done easily through a PowerPoint slide presentation, discussion boards, or even during synchronous classroom time. A weekly newsletter. Providing a weekly newsletter to students is an excellent way to not only get important information out to students, but also another method of cultivating community among the virtual classroom. There are many newsletter templates that can be found online, and I've seen teachers create video weekly newsletters as well. We are going to share some examples with you of online newsletters on the next slide when we get there. Email discussion prompts. So when sending a classroom weekly newsletter to continue to cultivate rapport and relationship building with students remotely, who you are not seeing every day face to face, the teacher could add some fun email discussion prompts to elicit engagement. When I was a full-time online virtual teacher, one that I used often with my high school students, which they loved, was 2 truths and 1 lie as a get to know me activity. So at the end of my weekly newsletter on Mondays, and they would have to read through and get to it at the end, it became one of their most favorite things to look forward to in the week. I would list 2 things that were true about myself and 1 that wasn't. You might have seen, I think like Jimmy Fallon does that on his talk show at night. It's been done around the block. I'm sure you know about it. And the student had to hit reply back to the email and guess which was the lie. And then they shared 3 with me. This was a great way to connect throughout the week. GIFs, memes, pics, oh my. So adding pictures, GIFs, memes, and graphics to student asynchronous communication is a fun way to not only disseminate important information through a moving or still image, but also is a creative method of incorporating alternate visual best practices that cater to the age, cognitive, and emotional level of the K-12 learner. So now we're moving to the right side of the slide, synchronous engagement ideas. Pace parties can be a fun, imaginative method of creating a learning space for students who have fallen behind in coursework or just need additional support with a lesson or assessment. On the Student Engagement Strategies for Teachers resource we are providing for you today, you're going to find visual examples on that resource of what this can look like, how to advertise for it, and steps for what should be included in a PACE party. Cross-curricular team teaching. So cross-curricular team teaching is a fun way to engage students from different classrooms and allow students the experience of learning from different teachers using various methods of delivering instruction. Consider challenging your staff to pair for 1 lesson this coming semester. Just pair for 1. Some excellent pairings I've seen in the past have been a music math lesson, a science and PE teacher collaborated, and social studies and art I've seen done a lot. There are many crossover concepts in curriculum. It just takes a little planning and creativity. Student teaching opportunities. When we don't see students face-to-face every day, sometimes our high-performing students don't get the attention they need, as we are so focused on calling and emailing our students who are struggling. So one idea is to intrinsically motivate and boost these high-achieving students and provide them these student teaching opportunities for them during synchronous instruction. I see a question in the chat, so before I talk about the last one, Michelle asked, where do we find the resources that we're referencing? Colleen just put 1 in there. They should be on your conference app as well, so look there. We have, how many do we have, Colleen? 5 or 6 different?
Yes, 5 or 6, but I'll also, once we get to the end of the slide deck, in case you weren't able to access them in the app, I'll also drop the files here in the chat so that you can grab them from there as well.
Great, thanks. On here is kind of a fun one, and it's called the In and Out Drop-In. So providing opportunities for open office hours for students during the week doesn't have to be boring. Encouraging teachers to be imaginative and find hooks that will entice students to meet teachers for extra help and support. Have you heard, I've heard Oregon has this. Have you heard of the fast food chain In-N-Out Burgers? I'm looking at the chat to see if anyone tells me yes or no. We don't have them in Indiana, but I heard they are in your state. So a California teacher I had one year that I was supervising, she took advantage of this, knowing her students loved In-N-Out burgers. So she created an entire theme around it, advertising her open office hours using the hook, come in and out during this block of time for a little help and a virtual burger. While this may seem silly, she saw a huge increase in students wanting to come for extra help. Sometimes thinking outside of the box is just the motivation students need in the remote learning environment. Teachers aren't there face-to-face to encourage students or even see their papers walking around the classroom knowing who needs extra help. So teachers need to be proactive and imaginative in helping ignite self-efficacy and motivation in students to engage with their teachers. And thanks, Michelle. I see Michelle has responded. You do have In-N-Out burgers there. I heard they are delicious. And with that, we're going to move on. I promised you today you would see some examples of some online newsletters. So we wanted to show you that. We have two different examples that Colleen is going to play for you. So the first one is a middle school language arts newsletter. This first one, notice how the teacher uses engaging graphics, a crossword puzzle is in there. Tips and tricks. Yeah, I'm kind of watching you go here, Colleen. Yeah, crossword puzzle is in there. Tips and tricks, you know, that show all different, you know, ways to engage the learner and things that are coming up. There is even highlighting a section to build community within her virtual classroom, showing survey results from a Thanksgiving poll she delivered to students in a synchronous lesson. She threw it into the newsletter as a follow-up, and a page with jokes. The what's next section gives the students autonomy to decide what they would like to see featured in the next newsletter as well. It is student-friendly, it is engaging, and the teacher weaves together seamlessly rich content regarding her course, but notice that she interjected relationship building pieces for her virtual community of students. So the second example we wanted to show you is a Spanish newsletter. And this one is a video. So Colleen's going to press play and I'll just talk as you're watching the screen. So notice this newsletter is in a video format for students. And while this newsletter could have teacher audio, this one does not have audio, and that's okay. It provides upcoming course reminders, a teacher get to know you spotlight, synchronous session dates and times, Spanish tips, a techie corner, including hyperlinks out to additional resources and learning opportunities for students, celebrations, student recognitions, which we talked about earlier in the presentation, and much more. So it's just a different way to engage with students online. As we know, students love TikTok videos and YouTube, watching 20-second clips of this and that, and sometimes giving them an alternate way besides reading something coming through really does engage them quite well. And with that, I'll turn it over to Colleen.
Okay. So now creating opportunities for collaboration. Just like you would look for student cooperation and collaboration in classroom observations, you need to consider how teachers are making group work part of the online learning experience as well. So here, students work together on learning activities and communicate with one another to complete the activities with some degree of independence from the teacher. And that might vary depending on the age of the students as well. This is definitely a more active approach to learning that not only promotes creative and critical thinking, but also provides the opportunity for much needed social interaction. Working together really helps students to practice communication, cooperation, and collaboration, as well as develop interpersonal and social emotional skills. So teachers can think about those activities that they had already planned for group work in their regular classroom, and those can usually be adapted for online group learning. Remote collaboration works especially well when teachers provide students with a clear task to complete, defined roles and responsibilities, and clear expectations of how they should be spending their time together. Okay, so now we're going to share an example of how a middle school teacher has incorporated discussion into asynchronous online class session with 2 students. So as you watch and listen, share your observations in the chat. What do you think this teacher did well to facilitate conversation with his students? And what could maybe even be improved? Has he collected evidence of student learning? Can you tell where their level of understanding is? Were they engaged? Just like those kinds of things that you would look for in classroom observations. And think about what feedback you would share with the teacher if you were doing this observation of the lesson. I'm going to pull this clip over.
Yeah, you're right, Cole. There would be some anarchy. Yep. Yeah, and what you said too about law enforcement, I think that's key as well. There could be a lot of chaos. So, governments, they want to enforce their laws. Yeah, and there could be, if there aren't any laws, or, there could be just there aren't any consequences to what people can and can't do. Ooh, I like that too, Sophia, about how you say if the people can see the government, they're more likely to trust it because they know that the people are making the rules. I like that. That is very, very true. Do you think, Sophia, when you know that a government is around, that they're present, does it make you feel safer, more comfortable, something like that? Or it might depend on the government, because there's obviously have been some bad governments in the history of the world, and no government is perfect because they're made out of people.
That's the end of the video clip.
Okay, cool. Thank you all for sharing that. Very good.
What did you guys notice in that discussion that was being facilitated? Obviously, students were responding to the teacher's questions in this chat pod rather than using their mics. But could you tell if they were engaged, if they were learning, how they were interacting with one another? I'll give you a minute to share some takeaways or observations in the chat. Yes, I loved that too, Karen. I think that's great for kind of replicating that classroom experience where teachers really, or students really like feeling recognized by their teacher. Oh, Scott, that's a great question. Pros and cons of students typing versus sharing aloud. I taught high school in the virtual setting, and I can tell you my high schoolers were very hesitant to hop on their microphones, but they were very chatty in that chat pod. A lot of times, especially with our high schoolers and sometimes middle schoolers, I think that the chat pod is just their comfort zone. They're used to texting each other and chatting over social media. You think about how little, especially teenagers, use their cell phones for things like actually speaking out loud. And I think it just creates a little bit more of a sense of comfort. And you have those kids who honestly aren't going to be the kids who are raising their hand in the classroom. So that chat pod just gives them an entryway into participation that they might not have in the classroom. But that's a great question. Little ones, I think, really like hopping on the mic though. Those elementary kiddos. Yeah, I think that using the mic is a great confidence builder and skill builder for younger students, especially in terms of like learning how to take turns speaking and not speaking over each other, in communicating their ideas with clarity. I think it's great practice for elementary students. And that real-time feedback, Becky, I agree. I think that was great how quickly he was responsive. Something that stuck out to in here that I really liked. You can see obviously the students' names are taken out of the chat pod so that when we watch the clip it's anonymous, but you can see one student is commenting nice job on the other student's response, and then he says thank you. I think that's really nice. It shows how they're supportive of one another, and that that community is definitely there. Even though they're not face to face or sitting next to each other, they're still supporting one another and motivating each other.
Okay, so moving on, we are going to talk about providing effective feedback. I am fully aware, and I know Colleen is too, that everyone in this room knows what effective feedback is. You are highly skilled and trained educators, and this is what we do. So today I want to focus on best practices for providing effective feedback when all of your students are working from home and are not physically in the classroom with your teachers. So this slide outlines 3 key areas as to what feedback should be and is not virtual learning specific. But when teaching remote learners, it's important to remember these things and think out of the box in terms of how you can strengthen and elevate these areas when you aren't face-to-face with students daily to provide them ongoing in real-time feedback. Feedback should align to objectives and skills, yet personalization needs to be interwoven into every piece of feedback with remote learners. This creates ownership of learning. One strategy is to acknowledge student efforts to positively impact their performance through key statements. Instead of writing, question 3 was incorrect on an assignment, consider starting with, I noticed that you thought this. Look at this resource or part of the text and let me know what you think about that after you've read it. So it not only lets the student know that you recognize the effort the student put into the assignment in your writing, going back to that netiquette construction we were talking about earlier, but also helps the student understand he or she has the autonomy to make corrections and engage with the teacher going forward. So rubrics are great for providing feedback towards an end final outcome. What teacher doesn't love a good rubric, right? However, especially in virtual teaching and learning, we need to hit feedback hard in formative pieces since we don't see them minute by minute in the classroom to be able to gauge learning and understanding. Think about, just for a minute, think about what you can't see. The teacher can't see the body language of the student that you normally would see in the classroom. You can't see frustration on a student's face when they don't understand something. Those checks for understanding during the learning process are vital to the student's success. So how can teachers be intentional about incorporating those into their virtual teaching? Communication with students daily is key in remote learning, whether it's phone calls or daily check-ins via email. Building virtual community time and social time to promote culture is important, but also be intentional about using that time to find out about what students know. Encourage student participation in the learning process. Monitor individual student contributions and determine if students need extensions or remediation. If teachers notice certain students aren't participating, have them personally contact the student to encourage them to participate. Pepper that conversation with positive reinforcement for their responses to keep the momentum going in virtual instruction. Another strategy that cultivates autonomy and student empowerment over learning is providing opportunities for students to give the teacher feedback, which leads us into our next slide. So an example of this is through a stoplight exit activity. Setting up small poll pads at the end of a synchronous lesson serves several purposes. So one, again, it provides a space for student ownership over learning, and they get to tell the teacher what they learned. They get to tell the teacher the favorite parts of the lesson, as well as areas that they still don't understand. It is real-time qualitative data teachers are collecting. Two, it provides them with immediate feedback that they can use to target interventions with individual students going forward in phone calls or other one-on-one instruction. Three, as a reflective practitioner, it allows the teacher to look for trends and themes in the student responses. Did the majority of students respond to yellow that day? They still have questions about a concept that the teacher thought he or she taught masterfully. How could the teacher approach it differently next time? Are there additional resources that could be created over the concept to help going forward? And 4, it's just a great way to build classroom community and rapport. And I just wanted to share real fast. I was teaching a high school class way back in the day. I use this exit activity at the end of every lesson. And my high school students are in there and they know what to do and they're typing into yellow, typing into green. I usually had a lot of green and yellow. I never usually had red. What stopped my learning today is red. Well, if your technology is working and things are going well, you know, usually that one's blank. But this one high school boy, he wrote a paragraph in red one time. And he said, oh my gosh, Dr. Wilson, I was trying to listen to you, but my cat was meowing the entire time and I couldn't hear anything that you were saying because my cat just kept meowing and meowing. And then he jumped on my keyboard and I couldn't see the keyboard to be able to type and I couldn't activate my microphone, and he got it all out. And everyone had a great laugh at that story. And then we left. He got it out. He loved the responses he got from his peers. And it was just a great way to build community and to allow him a space to be able to vent about the issues he had during that lesson. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Colleen.
All right, so we are nearing the end of our time together, and we've provided you with a lot of ways to engage with students and staff in online teaching and learning. So we are looking now to bring it full circle and to put some of that knowledge into practice. So we have one final teacher video clip that we're going to watch so that you can practice looking for virtual instructional strategies that we discussed. We're going to watch it together, and then we are going to send you into breakout rooms in small groups to discuss and share your observations of this little lesson clip. So be thinking as you're watching, if you were the administrator observing this lesson, what would you be noting? And there are some question prompts on here to kind of help guide note-taking, small group discussions. Be thinking about what instructional strategies the teacher is using. Look for evidence of student engagement and student learning. And again, if you were the one doing this observation, what would you share with the teacher in a post-conference? And what questions would you have for the teacher? And thank you. Leanna just dropped those prompts here into the chat because I'm about to pull over the video clip now. Okay. It's about just under 3 minutes long.
I poured my bowl of Apple Jacks and some spilled. There they are. I need your help graphing those Apple Jacks that spilled out. So can you see that graph that I have on my page and then what I have spilled out? How would you sort these to graph them? How would you sort these?
I would sort them, you know, by color.
Okay, what would you do, Yusuf? Go ahead and mute your microphone now, Charity. We're gonna let Yusuf try.
It's already muted. I mean, whatever. By the shape?
Okay, so we have all, well, they're all the same shape, so can we sort them out? They're all circles.
The big
Bailey said red and green. What was that?
The big holes and small holes?
Oh, I see. You can have bigger holes, maybe smaller holes. Well, I put up on this sheet a red and a green one. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to sort these into the red and to the green. And now what I want you to do is to tell me how many red I have.
Green.
How many green I have. Okay, Charity, I need you to raise your hand before you turn your microphone on, okay? So that everyone has a chance to think. And then when I say your name, you can go ahead and unmute it, okay? Okay, So when you're ready to share, then go ahead and click on that button that has the person raising their hand, and then we can each take a turn. All right, Bailey, go ahead. Tell me what you count.
6 green.
6 green and 4 red. Okay. And Yusuf sees the same thing, 6 green and 4 red. So I'm gonna move my mic or my camera over here. Hi, Grayson. We are working on graphing some Apple Jacks. I'm gonna bring out my stamping tool for me to show on, and Tristan, yeah, welcome, that we have 4 red and 6 green. Stamp. We have 6 green and 4 red. All right, so now with that information, I want you to raise your hand and tell me some information that you can say based on our graph. What can you tell me?
Okay. So at the end of our video clip, I'll pull that back over. As you go into breakout rooms, if you have a webcam and you are comfortable and camera ready enough, we would love for you to turn it on to have a face-to-face conversation with your small group. We're going to do just about 3 minutes because we know time is winding down. So 3 minutes in your breakout rooms. As you start your conversations, decide who in the group will share takeaways with the whole group when we reconvene, so that we don't pummel the chat with all of those takeaways that you are sharing. Okay, so Megan, if you can help me out here, we're going to go out into breakouts. All right, so I know some folks probably had to scoot out as we're nearing the end of time, but I would like to just spend a minute or two. If you were in a room that had some folks in it and you were able to chat about the video clip, please feel free to share out either in the chat or hop on your mics. Any observations that your group discussed or takeaways, follow-ups that you would do with this teacher. We'd love to know what you thought of the lesson and how your post-conference might go.
Colleen, this is Scott. One question I had is, as a traditional brick and mortar teacher, administrator, I kept thinking, what are the students doing? What are the students doing? I can't see what they're doing, and I wonder, do they have manipulatives? Do they have a whiteboard that they're graphing on? And it's hard to assess the efficacy of a teacher's lesson without seeing the students.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think something like that, that's a great thing to point out. I think it would be great to ask the teacher then in a post-conference, maybe how she prepared for the lesson. So maybe find out, did the teacher relay to students, hey, if you have some colorful cereal at home, or some buttons or something to replicate how she was doing the activity so that they could do it themselves at home. I think it would be great to find out if the teacher is encouraging that. But a lot of times what we look for is how the teacher is prepping students for these lessons. Do they know, just like, does a student know what they need to bring into the classroom? Do these obviously these were elementary students, do they know what they were expected to have on hand for this lesson? I do think it's best practice to give students that opportunity to do it along with the teacher at home. Trinity, that is something we can look for that. If you want to, Leanna and I are about to share our contact information in just a little bit. If you want to shoot one of us an email, we can definitely look for some high school geared resources to send you, if that's okay. Okay, and I know we are at time, so I'm going to scoot on over to our next slide.
So just wrapping it up, our key question was answered today. How do school administrators support teachers in implementing best practices? You can see on the slide, be intentional, walk the virtual hallways, and asynchronous communication is as vital as synchronous instruction in the remote learning environment. Thank you, everyone, for hanging with us to the bitter end. Thank you for an excellent session of collaboration and conversation. We hope this was helpful. You see our contact information. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact us anytime. We're happy to help. I would say good luck, but you don't need it. You're going to have a great year, and take care and enjoy the rest of the conference. And thank you again for coming.